and welcome to the last JavaScript and SharePoint Framework Special Interest Group for the year 2016. It's been a really exciting year, and we're going to kind of talk about that on today's call a little bit, as well as some of the normal updates. But welcome, everybody, and we will click the button. So real quick, just to remind everybody at this point, I think we're all fairly familiar, but sometimes we get some new faces, so we do want to kind of go over this on each call. What is the SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group all about? So we are part of the larger SharePoint Patterns and Practices program, which now exists under SharePoint Engineering in the product group. So the PnP stuff is getting very much more tightly tied into engineering and being part of that roadmap and part of that actual planning that goes on, as opposed to something that's a little bit more external. And the purpose of the special interest groups was, as the patterns and practices was growing, we saw a need to condense or allow folks to focus a little bit more in certain areas. So we started this one around the idea of the SharePoint framework and the client-side development. And so we're here to facilitate an open discussion around kind of all of those topics. So the SharePoint framework, client-side development in general, and then of course the JavaScript library, we're building to help folks in the client-side development space. So kind of those are the topics of the call. There's two great ways to get involved. You got links down there at the bottom to do the Microsoft Tech Community is that top link, SPFx-community. And the bottom link there is your starting page for kind of everything SharePoint. So dev.office.com/SharePoint. And that's for the new SharePoint framework. There's great step-by-step tutorials that get started on that. And really all the rest of SharePoint development as well. So if you're not ready to jump into SharePoint framework, or you have questions on the add-in model, or even full trust code, sort of development, resources there as well. So check that out. Great starting place for everything SharePoint development. So what are we going to talk about today? As usual, our updates are the latest on the SharePoint framework. Vasa's got some cool stuff coming there. And for the JavaScript core component, we're going to do a little bit different today. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look back at what we did in 2016, and then we're going to talk a little bit about where we're headed in 2017. And we don't have any demos today. We're going to leave the end of the call open for discussion. So if folks have questions or just kind of things they want to talk about, especially regarding the roadmap for 2017, things like that, welcome that. And this might end up being a slightly shorter call than normal, but that'll be just fine, I think, for folks. So I'll pass it over to Vasa now to go ahead and give us an update on the SharePoint framework.
Thank you, Patrick, taking over the presentation. There we go. Moving on things. So first of all, for the Christmas time, typically, if you have any free time, people are quite often interested on spending time on learning and watching new stuff and learning new stuff. So one thing what we finally got sorted out early this week is a simple location where you can actually go and filter down existing samples what we have on the SharePoint framework. And this location is actually in the dev.office.com. So if you go http AKMS SPFx samples, and I'm going to show you this one in practice in a demo in a second, you're able to actually filter down all of the SharePoint framework samples what we have available within our GitHub repositories in the SharePoint organization. And these are essentially samples which are partly coming from engineering, partly coming from the community, MVPs, and other community members. And these will be all updated to the release candidate level whenever we get the release candidate out for the SharePoint framework. Right now, a lot of these samples are there. Well, it slightly depends what the version of the sample is actually using. But let's have a look on that one in practice in a second. But AKMS SPFx samples is the URL to remember. So let me share my screen and show this one in practice. So related on SharePoint framework. So I'm going to share my monitor 3 because I do have 3 different monitors on my setup. And Patrick, you can probably confirm whenever the screen sharing works.
On my side.
Yes, because then you're pretty far from my current location. So
And have terrible US-based internet.
Yeah. Still.
Nope, I've got it.
Time. Okay, you got it.
Got it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if you got it, then the majority of the attendees got it as well. So, in the GitHub, we do have the GitHub and SharePoint organization. Inside of the SharePoint organization, we have the Spf Fx Web Parts, and these are essentially web parts which we gone through together with engineering. Well, I'm from engineering as well, but a lot of these are submitted by the community members. Now, there's quite a lot of them, and quite often, if you're looking into for a specific functionality, this might get actually quite overwhelming. So, what you can do is to go to that address, which was AKMS SPFx samples. So I'm going to actually zoom in one more time so that people can actually remember that. And if I click enter, let's see how fast the dev.ops.com is today. It will actually redirect us to the dev.ops.com and the PnP samples. And I didn't warm this up, so it might be that I'm landing on a cold server, so it unfortunately takes a while. After it's actually loaded the stuff, it's super fast. Come on. And while we're waiting that to happen, just to clarify the situation also in this side. So right now, one of the things what we did for all of the samples, what we have within the GitHub, you're able to check what's the drop version that sample has been created for. So as an example, the Microsoft Bot Framework web chat client-side web part is created currently with the drop number 5. And like mentioned, we're looking into immediately when the release candidate goes out, which is early January next year. We were looking into doing that actually before. Unfortunately, it's now slipping to early January. But we will upgrade all of these existing samples to the release candidate 0, well, the first release candidate level. We'll obviously ping the persons who created the sample if they're interested of doing that upgrade. If they're not, then we will do that upgrade for them to the release candidate. And the URL, yes, thank you, Patrick. And for some reason, dev.ops.com is super slow, so it's actually still loading that. I should have downloaded or requested the URL before. Come on. But like mentioned, on the sample level, on the metadata or the README of the sample, we do have a lot of stuff on the samples. This is a really good example, the React to do basic. The READMEs themselves quite often have a GIF animation, which is explaining how the functionality works. This particular sample is showing a lot of different capabilities in React, so it's actually explaining and providing additional insights on the README file as well. So explaining how things are working, how we're doing the all of these views, how we're taking stuff into use. In this case, as an example, we are using the display loading indicator, which is then showing the loading to-dos. And there we go, if you can actually see that in my screen share. Or how do we do placeholders, and how do we present the placeholders, or how do we load different utilities and so on. So a lot of these samples have really great insights on how things are working. Good. So coming back on the dev.ops.com, AKMS SPFx samples, you land on this one and in this particular page, which is actually all of the SharePoint PnP resources and SharePoint PnP samples. But this one is a prefixed with the filtering on the SharePoint Framework app. So we will only see the SharePoint Framework samples in here. And if I want, for example, I'm interested on Angular samples, I can filter them down by clicking the Angular.js, and after that, we should get a filtered result of the Angular web parts in here, which awesome demo effect. So let me try to do that one more time. Clicking React, and it's not actually filtering things properly, is it? No, it's not. What's happening? It seems to be that the dev.office.com is in holiday mode, so it's not actually able to do that, unfortunately. But anyway, it's listing all of the SharePoint framework samples, and you're able to have a look on what they are, how they behave, and what are the insights around the particular sample. If I open up any of these, let's say that I'm opening up as an example, what would be a good one? Knockout taxonomy one. It is actually giving me the insights in the context of the dev.office.com, and from here I can actually jump to the GitHub itself. Now, in our case, just to kind of pinpoint this one as well, there is quite a lot of individual samples in this one repository, and there is a reason why we wanted to do this. Somebody might say that why didn't you actually have one repo with the one sample? Which would have resolved the SharePoint organization to be, how we would put that, quite a big mess. So there would be samples and individual repos, and getting up-to-date samples would be really hard for you. The reason why we want to use a one repo for numerous samples is that whenever we push updates to all of these samples, you can go and just pull a latest version of the repo, or update your fork in a GitHub, and after that you have all of the needed updates. So all of the samples are then in the right level, so you don't have to need to go one by one to individual repos and update them, because that's a really painful thing as well. But good, I need to follow up with dev.office.com guys. Why aren't actually the results getting filtered properly? Because as an example, in this case, I'm using the React filter, but I'm still seeing the Angular 2 prototype sample in here. Good. That was a really quick demo on that one. So AKMS SPFx samples, that should be something what you remember. It only filters filter only the first option. Interesting. Okay. Anyway, I'll follow up with dev.office.com guys who are responsible of that service. So we'll make sure that that's actually fixed properly. And I'll switch back on the slides to do a quick summary on where we are with SharePoint framework. And let's wait a while. And Patrick, you can confirm whenever you see the slide as well. I just got it.
I got them.
Cool. Now, a few kind of pinpoints on the status where we are. We did release the Trop 6 back in the late November, and we were looking into getting the release candidate out before Christmas, but unfortunately we were unsuccessful of doing so. There was some complications in the process, and it was now delayed until early January. It's going to happen pretty early in January, which is fine. All of the documentation and labs, so the tutorials in the dev.office.com/SharePoint have been now updated on a Trop 6 level. So if you start by looking into or running through the tutorials, there was some issues which related on the new Trops, which were not updated on the tutorials. All of them are now updated. The videos have not been updated yet. So the videos which we have recorded for the tutorials will be updated immediately when I get the release candidate out. And after that, you can actually see the updated video recordings. What else? The dev preview extended to the first release tenants. Well, that was actually done as part of the Trop 6 release, so that was late November, but it's a good thing to remember. So any first release tenant can actually use already the dev preview of SharePoint Framework Web Parts. And the SharePoint Framework Web Parts do work with the modern sites and the classic side as well. Release candidate, like mentioned, coming early January. We're looking into updating the samples. We're looking into updating the videos, and the videos will be released then as part of at the same time, or roughly at the same time as the release candidate goes out as an NPM packages. Getting started with SharePoint Framework training package is in the works. That's not actually English, that's Finglish, but what it means is that we're working on a training package which is called Getting Started with SharePoint Framework, and we keep on updating that. And this is something what we're getting out as a videos, presentations, labs, and all of that. So you're able to actually go to the GitHub and pull the whole thing down. and the videos will be most likely shared from the YouTube channel. There will be actually a lot of material with that one. I'm going to show you all of the individual things in the following slide, but it's in the works, and we are planning to get a first version out of that training package early January. So hopefully pretty much quite fast after the release candidate is out as well. And then we keep on updating that whenever we go to the GA. There are more samples on the SharePoint GitHub organization, so we actually did have a quick look on that one in my screen sharing session, but it's the github.com/SharePoint/SPF Fx Web Parts. And more samples, if you're interested on contributing your samples, those are more than welcome. And then you get credited in our monthly releases and monthly communications on the work what you're doing. And there are more articles in queue for the dev.ops.com/SharePoint. So we have now 3 articles currently in the voice and technical review, and those should be coming out relatively fast as well. These additional articles are more around, hey, how do I reference an external JavaScript libraries? How do I use an external CSS within my web parts? How do I do stuff efficiently, and so on. So additional guidance is coming out all the time from a documentation perspective. There's a question from Cage. Are you open for community submitting SPFx sample web parts to the included to the samples repo? Absolutely. That's the whole idea. There's existing samples what we have within the that repository. A majority of them are actually coming from the community. There's only few web parts which have been created by SharePoint engineering as a reference implementation. Obviously, we want to kind of show different aspects. So if your whatever contribution or a web part isn't actually showing anything new, you can absolutely keep it in your own GitHub profile and as an own GitHub repository. But if you see that you have something what you can actually add on top of the existing samples, absolutely welcome to get additional samples in. And we would highly appreciate that, because that's highly helpful for anybody else in the community as well. And the Getting Started with SharePoint Framework. So the Getting Started with SharePoint Framework training package, like mentioned, scheduled roughly on the mid-January. It will go out. It will have 8 modules. Those 8 modules are split to a smaller sections. So one individual module is not really a 1.5 hours video and a training session. We wanted to split that in a more reusable, smaller sections. So the sections are kind of a sub-sections of a module. But all of these sections have an individual presentation, video and labs and all of that. We do have presentations, demos, labs and recorded videos coming up for all of this. And this will be shared in a GitHub for anybody. So if you are looking into training material, you want to redeliver this material for your internal customers or your external customer, or if you're an MCT, meaning trainer company, you can just pull the training packets down, choose which of the pieces you want to actually use, and then redeliver the training as much as possible. We really want to make sure that people are able to reuse this as efficiently as possible. So we will give all of this material for you for free for reuse, and we don't actually care where to use them, and there's no copyright. Well, there will be probably the typical Microsoft copyright thing, but we don't actually care if you're going to take individual slides from these decks and reuse them anywhere. Like we don't care if you use that for the presentations what we share from a PnP side as well. And as you can see, those are the individual sections what we have. So there's like 40 individual presentations which are coming up. All of them are showing separate topics, and these are like 5 to 15 slides as an individual section, and explaining that particular topic, going through what it means, and like mentioned, there will be a video as well for that one. For this one, the Getting Started SPFx. Now, let's be clear on this one. This is coming in mid-January. We do not have a yet URL for this one. this will be shared in roughly on mid-January. We will make enough noise about when the material is available. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that we're working on this one, that it is also coming out relatively soon. The reason why we haven't released this one yet is simply because we're not yet in a release candidate level or in a GA level. So there will be some breaking changes when we're jumping from a drop 6 to the release candidate, and the less material which we have released, the easier it will be to us to update that. But when we go to the release candidate, we're looking into minimizing all of the breaking changes in the future, going closer to the GA and getting the SharePoint framework finally out. It's going to happen pretty soon, which is super cool. Cool. That's pretty much the quick update from a SharePoint framework side. Quick and quick, I still use 20 minutes. I always use 20 minutes almost of the presentation. So, Patrick, jumping to you.
Great, thanks, Vesa. Great updates, and I think really exciting for the community to see what's coming. Looking forward to early January and getting that release candidate 0 out there. So now we got a quick end-of-year update and summary on the JavaScript core component. As always, we'll start off by saying thank you to everybody that's contributed. You're going to hear me over the next few minutes talk about community a lot, so it really looking at 40 people on this call today and seeing all the people that have contributed over the year is fantastic. So thank you to everybody. You all have made this work possible. So, and I think it's a really big deal that inside a year we've kind of stood up and gotten this many folks to be interested and participate. Real quick, do want to mention opportunities to participate in this special interest group. Demo a web part. If you develop a SharePoint framework web part and want to show it off on this call, please do let us know. We're going to really try and highlight that and push that a lot next year as the release candidates and then GA comes out. So want to see what folks in the community come up with. So if you're working on something cool, get in touch with myself or Vesa, and we'd love to get you lined up to demo that on one of these weekly or bi-weekly calls. Also, if you happen to be using the core library in a project that doesn't happen to be a SharePoint framework web part, certainly welcome demo around that as well. We've had a couple cool ones, kind of in that vein throughout the last year. And of course, you can always contribute on GitHub, whether that's submitting issues, whether that's submitting pull requests to do either code fixes or enhancements, or just generally being part of the conversation and providing us feedback on what we're doing. And the avenues to do that are those communities we mentioned before, the Microsoft Tech community. We've got the Gitter channel. We've got then these bi-weekly calls as well are all great avenues to let us hear that feedback. So really going to be working to drive community participation next year. That's going to be a big focus for me. So hopefully we can get everybody that would like to involved a little bit more. So looking back on the year, where have we been? If you forget, we started this entire special interest group effort back in February of this year. So we started from 0, from nobody even knowing we were doing this, to now 41. We get people continue to join the call. Started from 0. We've grown both a library and a community in that time. So I want to again thank everybody for being a part of that journey. Throughout that time, we had 163 pull requests and 113 issues. So that's fantastic. So that represents great work both from the community and giving back through the pull requests and giving back through reporting issues they might find with the library or ideas for enhancements. And hopefully that great feedback you guys have all seen, you folks have all seen that over the last year we've tried to be as responsive as possible to that, incorporate those ideas and those enhancement ideas and that feedback into the work we've done and the directions we've taken with the library and with our other work. So great feedback, great contributions, ideas, and participation from all of you. So I, again, want to say thank you. I can't say thank you enough. It's been a great journey, I know, for myself, and it's interesting to have been the first special interest group, and then for it to have worked out as well as it has is always a nice treat. And the other kind of side effect is we helped SharePoint developers begin to transition to the SharePoint framework web dev model without even telling you guys why. And a lot of people went on that journey with us, which is fantastic. And I know I can speak for myself, and hopefully for a lot of the rest of you, I know I learned a lot in this last year, both about sort of open source development in general, as well as all the various technologies we're using. And again, 2 links down at the bottom there for getting involved in the community, and then the JS Core library is on Gitter. Is a great place if you have quick questions to jump in and get involved as well. We try and be as responsive as we can to all these forums. So do get involved. Do let us hear your voice. Do let us hear your ideas, your thoughts, your feedback. Let's keep that going. So I did want to show you guys some numbers for the last year. And these are, we talked about this, I guess we probably first talked about it in August. We introduced tracking. We've been doing tracking in the in the CSOM core component now for a number of months, and Vesa usually talks about those numbers in the monthly calls for the CSOM library. So I wanted to bring up those same numbers for us for the JavaScript call and talk about what those numbers look like for our library. All of them, I think, are really exciting and really positive in the sense that we're seeing growth sort of across all these metrics. Now, we're not quite at the billion requests a month that the CSOM core component is getting, but we're working on it, and we're making great progress, and I think that's really exciting to see. So the first thing there is the unique tenants by month. And so this is, all of these numbers, I've ignored the versions, so we're not looking at specific versions. We're just as anybody using any version of the JavaScript core component library. So we started in August with 1, which if you go do some research was me testing that out. And then we jumped up to 84, 138, and we ended up in December, and we still have a week in December, but 214 tenants are now using in some capacity the JavaScript core library, which I think is really exciting to see. Yes, that's incredible growth from August to September. It's something I'm really proud of that jump. from not tracking anything to tracking, we really saw a huge volume increase. And then looking at the next graph, if you move to the right, is the unique total requests per month. And so that's just raw requests per month. And so we're over 3 million now. So we're going kind of 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. Hopefully in January we'll get to a billion. So that would be another great jump. But in all seriousness, really impressive growth for something that is really, I think, keyed much more towards the Sharepoint framework and much more towards the client-side development. So a lot of folks, it might not be part of their daily development life yet. We're still seeing great uptake, and that's really attributable to the great work that all of you in the community have been doing as well to help us on this journey, and we wouldn't be growing as well without the feedback. And so the big graph in the bottom is kind of a combination of those two, so you can see the number of tenants and the 3.1 million requests. And then, yeah, we've talked about that, having the loop just to generate requests, but that would, I think, we found out pretty quickly.
I think I have to do a quick comment on that one. So in the November, for the PnP PowerShell and the PnP JSON core, the C# core, we were really close hitting 1 billion HTTP requests, and we were not quite sure. So we were super tempted to actually have a scheduled web job which would be doing stuff in a loop. We didn't do that, and we still passed 1 billion HTTP requests for the C# component, so that was super cool. But
that's right, we didn't do that. Wink, wink.
No.
But so really, really impressive numbers. So, and I do want to thank Bert actually put the Power BI dashboard together that I got all this from. So really fantastic work from Bert, so thanks to him for that. And then one thing I think is really cool about the JavaScript core library is if you look at the request count that list over on the right of this slide, Australia is our #1 country by request count. So I think that shows the global reach of kind of the client-side development and the way folks are finding to use that. And then you've got Brazil, Switzerland, Sweden, Spain, Canada, Norway, and the rest. But really exciting to see folks around the world kind of picking up the library. And like I said, a year ago it didn't exist. And so we've got in this year, this many folks have seen the work we've all done and have picked it up and made it part of what they're doing in their development life. So I think that's really exciting. And I think that's what's Vesa got.
No, just a quick note on this one, because I think people in the call or watching the video might be like, hey, how would you know this information? Which is a fair question. And let me quickly explain how we do this. So whenever you're using the PnP.js core, we're using the client tag property as or header in the HTTP request. So whenever you are posting anything against SharePoint Online, we're actually adding a small header using the client tag header, which is then getting stamped or getting included in the HTTP requests. Because we are actually SharePoint Online, so we are the SharePoint engineering, and in the SharePoint Online, we do actually track we do have really strict metrics and tracking in the SharePoint Online on the usage. We are obviously tracking those individual HTTP requests on the other side. And then what we built as part of our analytics in the PnP is that we essentially go through this massive, let's say, data warehouse system, and we crawl all of those HTTP requests where that particular header has been actually stamped. And from that information, we're able to then draw essentially the conclusions out of this many tenants, these are the countries, or these are the countries where the tenants have been registered. We don't actually know where the traffic is coming as such, but it has been hitting a tenant where the tenant has been registered to a certain country, as an example.
Yep, that's great. And we do talk about that a lot more in depth. I forget which recording it is. But one thing I want to stress, along with what Vesa said, is this is all aggregate numbers we get. We don't see any details about what the requests were or who was making the request. I mean, we know the tenant, but we don't know user data. We don't know names. We don't know any of your data. What we just know is somebody made a request and it has that header in it, which is how we kind of get these raw numbers. And
the raw numbers are super, super important, obviously, for us to show how things are actually being used. Because if the usage is 0, then it means that why would we actually do this? But if the usage is growing, then we keep on investing on these things. So.
Yep. So transitioning a little bit from sort of our growth in this last year, to where are we going to be going in 2017? So 2.0 is going to come out in early 2017. That's going to be tied closely to the release of the release candidates for SharePoint Framework. So I'm waiting on the release candidates to double check that some things with the sort of the builds and the typings and whatnot are fixed. But now, if you look at the dev branch of our library, that branch is now at 2.0. So you can check out the dev branch and play with that and give feedback and things like that. And I have not yet written any of the blog posts or anything describing those changes, but did want to get that out there for folks that might be curious over the holidays and have some time and want to play with that. You'll need to update your local dev environment a little bit. You need to update to the Node 6.9. Whatever the current thing is for the long-term support version. That has a lot of the ES6 features in it. And you'll need to delete and then recreate your node modules folder is kind of the easiest way. So just delete node modules and do an npm install once you pull down the latest project. But so the 2.0 is coming. Check it out on the dev branch. Welcome early feedback on that, but understand it's still a work in progress, so we're not 100% done. But do take a look, and if you have ideas or feedback, definitely let us know. We're going to focus in the next year on a little bit tighter integration with SharePoint Framework. And so what does that mean? So as SharePoint Framework is released and becomes GA, and folks really start using that in their day-to-day development life for enterprise production code, my expectation would be we're going to hear a lot of cool feedback around, man, it'd be great if X was easier or Y was easier, or why can't I have something that helps me do Z? And that's what we want to start building into the core library. So just in the way that the CSOM library grew, finding, making it easier for folks to do sort of common tasks, add lists, things like that. As the uptake grows, I figure we'll get more feedback, and as folks use the SharePoint framework more, we'll aim to make our library more helpful when working with the SharePoint framework. So that's one goal. Another goal is focusing on driving samples, documentation, and enhancements. So I think at this point we've got a fairly mature library in the sense that I think we've got a lot of the REST API covered. Though,
just bring it in. Yeah, shoot, I'm at home.
I'm going to mute Frank real quick. So focusing on those samples, documents, and enhancements, and then driving the community involvement and contributions. So like I mentioned earlier, we've had great interest from the community, great participation from the community, and I want to see that grow even more in the next year. So hoping to get more folks demoing stuff on these calls. So once, again, SharePoint Framework goes GA, I figure more folks will be using it, so an opportunity to see what more folks out in the community are doing. So I think that's going to be really exciting, and then hoping to bring more people into contributing to the library. And then we're going to continue to drive our priorities based on feedback from folks in the community. So like I said earlier, if you're using SharePoint Framework and there's some task you're doing over and over again that you wish could be a little easier or a little more automated, that's the kind of thing we'd like to hear, and we'd like to see what we can do to help. So keep giving us that great feedback, and we'll continue to be responsive to that feedback and seeing how things progress with the library. And finally, I did want to mention, for those of you that were on last week's call, I talked about how we took provisioning out of the core JavaScript library for 2.0. So we have now created, but it is empty. The new repo is going to be PnP-JS-provisioning. That is empty. I'll be looking to move what we have into that over the holidays as I have time. But that will be the new location for folks that are interested in developing the provisioning capability in JavaScript. But it's going to be two separate libraries, which I think makes a lot of sense in terms of development strategy as well as prioritization. And as I mentioned before, that's a place we in the core team are really looking to the community that if there's genuine interest out there and sort of driving a provisioning engine you can run in Node, we'd love to be supportive, but it's not something we currently have the folks to dedicate to that. It's just a resourcing challenge, since for a lot of us, we do this in our what amounts to our free time. So looking for folks in the community, if you're really interested in provisioning, or that's a use case you see a lot of use for, would love to have you join in and work on the provisioning, which is something we're very supportive of, but that's going to really be driven by a community effort. So moving forward, like I said, we don't have any demos in this call other than what Vesa showed us earlier. So I'm going to kind of open the floor up to an open discussion around what we've got in terms of coming up for the next year. If you have questions, ideas, would love to hear them. You can come off mute. Yeah, you can type in the IM window. I am not sure. I wasn't watching. I want to scroll up a little bit and see if there are any questions, directed at me. But so I'll just kind of open the floor. So see if anybody's got anything. I don't see anything up in the window here.
Hey, I have a question about the controls that are being used in the modern UI, like the field controls, like the date picker and the people picker. Is there any talk about making those available, so if we wanted to create our own custom forms in React, we could not have to rewrite those ourselves?
Great question. I am not aware of any plans immediately. Vesa, I don't know if you know anything more on that topic or not.
Sorry, I do apologize. I was reading the link which was shared in the IO window. So it was forms sharing what? Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, if you want to build people picker. Well, not just the people picker, but the date controls, the people picker, all those custom controls that are being used in your forms. It would be great if we could reuse them in our own.
Yes, yeah, that's absolutely understandable. So many of those actually, many of the implementations are as part of the Office UI Fabric React components. So from a functionality perspective, they are actually available, and I think, but maybe not as advanced or not as mature as they are exposed within the forms as such. But we're looking into getting a lot of the stuff, the modern experience is open sourced or source open in the GitHub as well. And that's a really good input around the components, like the individual field editors. So it would be great to be able to use them within your custom implementation. But the Office UI Fabric components, I'm just looking into a link for that. These are, so everything what we built within the modern experiences are built using these things, and we do have a date picker as an example in the Fabric component. So you're able to actually then build your own UIs and forms relatively easily. And dev.docs.com is super slow today, so let me get that link in the IAM window. Yes, the Fabric is the main URL, and then the components are the ones which are available. And these are essentially coming, so the source for these is in the GitHub as well.
It appears that you've taken the UI Fabric controls, for instance, the date picker. The UI Fabric date picker, it looks like the one that is used within SharePoint, but you've put additional code in there to let the user pick a date time. So you've got enhanced versions of them that would be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And no doubt we're looking into doing that. Right now, the key objective for us is to get stuff released. Immediately when we get more stuff on the GA, then we will start looking into open sourcing these individual components, individual things, elements on the SPFx, like the Yeoman templates are going to be open sourced at some point, so that people are able to add their own stuff on them as well. When and how fast, that has not unfortunately yet been decided, but we do absolutely understand the ask. So it will come, but it's not there yet.
And then regarding the UI Fabric, they have a details list. Do you have any idea or know where I could find out how to make that, or if that's possible, to make that an editable list?
I wouldn't actually know that. I would actually have to go and look on the source code of the UI Fabric React components. So what we actually have currently available, and that's evolving really fast as well. So if you have a look on the GitHub of the Office UI Fabric React, there are daily edits and changes all the time. But I wouldn't know I don't know how to. I cannot answer that question directly, unfortunately.
And then back to the add the API to check if a user is in a group. That's on the user voice. I don't think either myself or Vesa would have any exact more to share on that, but that's the right forum for it. So hopefully folks will see that.
More votes.
The API is always getting enhanced. So, I mean, I think part of the issue is it's a very expensive operation to start traversing security groups, which might be limiting that. That's just a guess on my point, or on my part. But yeah, more votes, but that question is in the right place, and the right folks do look at the user voice. Pardon me. So that's a great place for feedback and requests like that. I want to thank everybody. Our next meeting is January 5th of 2017. It's hard to believe it's already been a year. Again, really appreciate all of you being part of the journey and look forward to continuing it next year. Thank you. Everybody have a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays, whatever that means to you, and look forward to talking to you in the next year. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.